Hi, this is Regina White Favors with Homeless Recovery Tips. And so the topic for this discussion is don't decorate the shelter. This is very important because you have to remember that this is not the end goal. You living in the shelter is not the vision. It's not the end goal. It's not the promised land. It is a tool to correct whatever thinking that you had prior to entering the shelter and that you are now going to have to address. So, for instance, if your thinking was to help everyone volunteer your time, volunteer your finances without boundaries. And then in doing so, it led you to losing your place. And now you are homeless and in a homeless shelter. That's an understanding that needs to be corrected because you have to make sure that you have secured you first and make sure that you can sustain security for yourself, which means also financial stability before you can even help anyone else. And you are not put on this earth really to be a financial well for everyone else, right? You have to be responsible financially. And so, when you do that, it disrupts any progress you were making in your own life. So when you decorate the shelter, you are basically suggesting that you are there to live. That's your apartment, that's your place. You're on some kind of lease, and you're going to plan the rest of your life from the shelter. I didn't when I had to stay in the shelter during the financial recession, that was the first thing that came to mind. I'm not decorating it because this is not my pit stop. This is not the end for me. And if I go and put up pictures and I buy things and I get sheets and covers and put up a little plant or something like that, I'm decorating my cage. I'm decorating my graveyard. I'm decorating my pit stop. And that is not something that I wanted to do. I remember when I first had to go into the Salvation Army shelter, and I had already been in a previous shelter prior to that in Dallas. But when I had to go into Salvation Army because of another setback, I remember older women. I mean, really older women, not sort of like 20s and 30s. There were some there who were of that age, but I remember this older woman, like in her 60s or something, and that I got the sense that she had just settled. She was not going to fight anymore. If she died in the shelter, she was going to die in the shelter. And she had actually gotten sick, and they had to call the ambulance and pull her out or something like that. And then I don't remember whatever happened to her because she never returned. But it was something that came over me, some feeling that washed over me, something. I don't know what it was, but it was something that came over me that sort of ushered me into this thinking that she settled, that she had lost all of her fight, whatever fight that she had prior to entering that shelter, and that likely caused her to go into a shelter. She had no more fight. She was at an age where she just didn't have any more energy. And that is something that really got to me. And I remember feeling this same thing in my, I think, 1920s 2021, somewhere around that. I was working for a customer service job, and it had a project for Western Union. And it was one of those jobs where you got right out of high school, something, some little fly by night company. They always messed up our checks. They played around with hours. It wasn't something that was stable, but it was something that I was able to keep for a good while until I relocated to San Diego. And I looked around one time before. I just had a mind to look around, and I noticed that there were older people at that job, 40s, 50s, 60 years old. Now, granted, sometimes if you are already retired and you just want to make some extra money, that's completely different, right? You work a few hours a week and that's fine for you. But these were older people that I got the sense that they did not do something right in their 20s, and because they didn't do something right in their 20s, it led them to where they are in this job that's really for a high school student or person right out of high school. Led them to that job, and they are kind of forced to be on that job. And it was just something that I remembered about that. And I said to myself, I made a declaration to myself, even then, I'm not going to stay on this job. I'm going to I want something different for myself, something better. And I started taking night classes. And even on that job, I didn't decorate because I knew that I wasn't going to stay there. I respected it. I did what I was supposed to do. But then when it came time for me to plan my transition to San Diego, um, um, I I just began to plan. Now, granted, when I moved to San Diego, um, I was moving from an apartment to a residential hotel. And even though there wasn't a lease system, it was a system where the hotel was originally a hotel and began to rent out rooms for apartments. So I still had rights to be there, but you could t- technically say that it was kind of like being homeless too. And so I stayed there for about 10 years and then had to relocate to to Dallas because of the job situation. But I say all that to say sometimes there are some declarations that you need to make concerning the space you're in, the transition that you're in. Don't decorate the shelter. Don't That could be a metaphor, that could be a practical thing. Like if you are in jail or if you are in a correctional facility of any kind, I do understand that there may be times where you may need to put up a picture, and that could be to help your mental because you are sort of like in a cage, and you don't want the walls to be too bare. You want a vision. You want a picture of where you want to go to leave, right? Then I would say don't put up flowers. Don't put up anything that would make living where you are comfortable. Put up a vision of a house that you want to get. Put up a vision of two married couples. A married couple. Put up a vision of what you want to become versus where you are. And so don't decorate the shelter. Don't decorate the cage. Don't decorate the prison. Don't decorate where you are because you are still in transition. Do respect where you are. Try to make, on some level, comfortable where you are so that you don't feel the toxic nature of where you are, but don't plan to stay there. And don't run yourself so thin and don't burn yourself so thin to the point that you don't have any fight to leave there. So the lady who decided to stay there, the 60-something-year-old lady, older woman who decided to stay there, I guess she didn't have any family, she didn't have anything, she didn't have any. I don't remember her having a job, and she was just old, living in a homeless shelter, and she just didn't have any more fight. And so that bothered me, and I just remember that, and I still remember that. And then I saw a lot of people who sort of shelter hopped. And so when one shelter ended, so for like Salvation Army will give you 30 days, I think. I had to stay at Center of Hope at one time in Dallas for 90 days. And when your time is up, I noticed that a lot of people didn't have a plan. They didn't have anything. They didn't have a job. They didn't have any way of earning any money. And so when one shelter kicked them out or their term ended, they just moved to the next shelter and stayed there for however long that they could stay there. It was hard for them to get on program because maybe they had the reputation of moving from shelter to shelter. And so that is a way of also decorating the shelter because you don't have any plans of leaving the shelter system. It's just a cycle. It's just a hamster's wheel. You running on a hamster's wheel. You're going somewhere and nowhere at the same time. And so don't decorate the shelter. Don't put up stuff that will make you feel comfortable so that you don't leave. And then also think about it in terms of if you put too much stuff, if you bring too much into that space, it'll be hard for you to transport all of that to your new place. So, in other words, travel light, live light wherever you are. If you are having to live with someone, and do understand that that is considered homelessness, if you are not on the lease, if you have to live with someone, don't decorate that place. Because at any time that person decides he or she does not want you there, you have to go. You'll be kicked out, right? And then that is especially true if you don't know your rights in that type of situation. And so don't decorate. The only place that you could decorate, you should decorate, is your own place. And there's a video on that as well. So this is homeless recovery tips. Don't decorate the shelter.